Forgive me for leaving this way. By the time you read this, I will be gone. It is better for both of us.
The maid left a note under his pillow and vanished away. Sofia Bellini pressed the white camellia flat between 2 pages of wax paper, smoothing it with the side of her thumb, the way she had done every year for 5 years, and did not let herself cry. The flower had gone the color of old cream, its edges curling inward like a hand closing. She held it up to the window so the last gray light of the lake came through it, checking for tears in the petals, checking the way a person checks something they know they are about to lose. Behind her, the fire in the hearth ticked and settled. Somewhere above her head, in a room she had cleaned 4,000 times, a man she loved slept without knowing her heart had already left the house. She folded the camellia into a square of paper, and on that paper she wrote 11 words that had taken her 3 hours and 4 ruined pages to get right. Her handwriting did not shake. That was the part that would undo him later, that her hand had been steady. She climbed the east staircase in stocking feet, skipping the 3rd step because it always sang under weight, the way she had taught Lucia to skip it during hide and seek. She lifted the corner of his pillow. She set the folded note beneath it, camellia and all, and let the pillow fall back into place like a lid closing over something. Then Sofia Bellini walked down the mountain road in the dark, past the vineyards, past the church with the cracked bell, and did not look back at the house that had never, not once, not really, been asked to be her home. What did that note say to make a man who feared nothing, afraid to open his eyes the next morning? Before she was anyone's secret, Sofia Bellini was the only person in a 9-bedroom estate who knew which of the 11 clocks ran 4 minutes fast, and why old Signora Renata's arthritis meant the tea had to be poured, never handed. She woke before the light did. She moved through the house like someone reading a language only she still spoke, which shutters swelled in the lake damp and needed a shoulder, which floorboard in the west hall betrayed a footstep, which of Alessandro Bellini's shirts he wore when his shoulders carried something heavier than usual. She pressed those shirts with more care than the others. No one asked her to. She simply noticed, the way she noticed everything, and did something quiet about it. She carried a ring of 40 keys on a leather strap worn soft from her hip, and she never once needed to check which one fit which door. 6 months into her first year, a supplier's driver had looked past her at the doorway and asked, not unkindly, if the lady of the house was in. Sofia had smiled, said no, and carried his crates to the cellar herself, 3 at a time, until her arms ached. She did not correct him. She filed it away in the quiet room inside her, where she kept every small erasure, and she went back to work, because the pastries would not bake themselves, and Lucia would be home from her tutor at 4, wanting to hear the rest of the story about the fox in the vineyard. She was, by any honest measure, the reason the house still felt like one. The call came on a Tuesday in March, 3 years before the note beneath the pillow. The housekeeping agency in Como had a position: live-in, discreet family, generous terms, immediate need. Sofia had packed 1 suitcase and a tin of her mother's rosemary biscuits and taken the winding coastal road up into the hills, past the iron gate that opened for her only after a man with a rifle slung across his back studied her face for a long moment and then, strangely, smiled. She did not know yet that the family she was walking toward answered to no law but its own. The estate's great hall smelled of cedar polish and last night's cigar smoke when Sofia first heard his voice, not raised, never raised, simply low enough that 4 men in dark suits went still around him like water around a stone. She did not know who he was. She only knew that a man was blocking the doorway she needed to sweep, and so she said, "Excuse me," in the plain, unbothered tone she used on anyone standing where she needed to be. The hall went silent in a way she would only later understand. Alessandro Bellini turned. Steel blue eyes, a thin white scar crossing the bridge of his nose like a line drawn by someone in a hurry. He looked at her the way men in his position rarely got looked back at, which is to say, he looked at her the way she had looked at him, as an obstacle, politely, and nothing more. "Do you know who I am?" The question was quiet. It was not really a question. "You're standing in the doorway," Sophia said, "and I have a floor to finish before Signora Renata's lunch." She did not step back. She did not lower her eyes the way the men around him had trained themselves to do. She simply waited, broom in hand, for him to decide whether he was going to move. He moved. This was the first crack in the wall Alessandro Bellini had built around himself in the 11 years since he'd taken his father's chair. The belief that providing a roof, a wage, and silence was the same thing as caring for someone. No one had refused to be afraid of him in longer than he could remember. It unsettled him more than a blade would have. Then small footsteps, and Lucia came skidding around the corner in socks, 9 years old and breathless, and threw both arms around Sophia's waist before anyone could stop her. "Sophia's here. Zio Alessandro. Sophia's here. She has to see the fort I built," she promised. Alessandro watched his niece, who flinched from strangers, who had not hugged anyone freely since her mother died, bury her face against a stranger's apron like she'd known her for years. He said nothing, but something in his jaw loosened, just slightly, the way a hand unclenches without the person noticing. He did not explain to Sophia, then or ever, that he had already decided, in that half-second, that she would not be assigned to the East Wing with the other staff, that she would answer only to him and to Renata, that something about the stillness in her had reached past every guard he'd built. What would you do if the most dangerous man in the room stepped aside for you and never told you why? It did not happen in a single scene. It happened in 100 small ones, the way a shoreline is shaped by water no one watches move. He gave his men Sundays off, after a decade of demanding they answer at any hour. He gave the vineyard workers a bonus. The autumn the harvest failed. He gave Sophia, without a word of explanation, the room with the good window, the one that caught the morning light off the lake, and told Renata only that the maid's quarters needed better air. He never once told Sophia he had chosen it for her. She found the pressed camellia by accident, tucked between the pages of a worn novel he'd handed her one evening. "You said you liked this one," the only book in the library he'd ever actually read himself, thanking her, offhandedly, for noticing 3 days before a rival family's men that a shipment manifest didn't match its crates, sparing his mother's 70th birthday celebration from becoming a funeral. He had slipped the flower in without thinking. Sophia had pressed it flat that same night and never told him she'd kept it. She began carrying it folded into the corner of her apron pocket, the way some women carry a photograph. One evening she found him in the estate office, long after Renata had gone to bed, jacket off, tie pulled loose, staring at a ledger with the particular stillness of a man doing arithmetic he didn't want to finish. Payroll for men whose families depended on him. Debts from his father's era that had never stopped compounding. She did not ask. She set down a plate of bread and oil at his elbow, and left before he could thank her. But she had seen it. The cost underneath the command. The weight he never let his own men see him carry. His men noticed her before he ever said a word about her. Matteo, the driver, began pulling out her chair at the staff table without comment. Old Gennaro, who forgot everyone's name within a week of meeting them, remembered hers on the first try and used it every time, like a small flag planted. It was around then that a new face began appearing at the perimeter of Alessandro's world. Vittorio Marchetti, a neighboring associate with an easy smile and a habit of remembering everyone's birthday, offering logistics help between friends. Always warm, always useful, always somehow present when something needed overhearing. Sophia liked him well enough. She had no reason not to. The first wrongness came to Sophia not as a fact, but as a texture. The way Vittorio's smile did not quite reach his eyes anymore, when he thought no one was watching him watch her. She had been in the wine cellar restocking when she heard him on the phone through the stone wall. His voice dropped into a register she had never heard him use at the dinner table, listing numbers, ports, names that did not belong to any charity gala guest list. She did not understand all of it. She understood enough to feel the floor of her stomach drop. She told Alessandro that night, carefully, in the kitchen, over the sound of the kettle. He listened. Then he told her, gently but with the particular finality of a man who had decided the matter was closed, that Vittorio had done business with the Bellini family for 6 years, that she must have misheard, that she shouldn't worry about things that weren't hers to carry. He did not mean it as a dismissal. It landed as one anyway. She said nothing further. She simply began locking the cellar door behind her from then on, and did not mention it again. 3 nights later, an envelope arrived for her with no return address. Inside it, a photograph of her mother's grave in Bergamo, and a single, unsigned line. Some homes are safer left behind. No threat was named. None needed to be. Sophia stood very still in the corridor with the envelope in her hand, and made a decision that was entirely her own, one she would not explain to anyone, then or ever. She would not tell Alessandro what she now believed, that Vittorio Marchetti had learned exactly how much she'd overheard, and exactly how to make her disappearance look like her own quiet choice. She chose, instead, to disappear on her own terms, before someone else could choose it for her. That was the night she pressed the last camellia, between wax paper, and began writing a note by candlelight that took 4 attempts to get right. Alessandro found the note 2 mornings later, when Sophia did not appear for the 8 o'clock tea, and Renata, alarmed, sent Lucia to check her room. Lucia found the bed made, the closet empty of the one gray coat Sophia always wore into town, and beneath the pillow, his pillow, not hers, a folded paper and something dry and pale inside it that fell open on his palm like a small collapsed wing. You once told me this house would always be my home. I finally realized it never truly was. Take care of Lucia, and don't look for me. He read it 4 times before the words agreed to mean what they meant. He tore the estate apart looking for a reason before he let himself feel the loss, and it was Renata, of all people, who found the torn envelope Sophia had hidden inside her sewing basket, the photograph of the grave, the unsigned line about safer homes. Alessandro understood, all at once, with the particular clarity that comes too late, that Sophia had not left because she'd stopped loving anyone in that house. She had left to keep them from being hurt for what she knew. He also understood, reading her handwriting a 5th time, that some part of what she'd written was not about Vittorio at all, that she had been telling him something true about the 5 years before the threat ever arrived, that a woman can be given a beautiful room and still never once be asked to sit in it as an equal. He confronted Vittorio that same afternoon, quietly, without his usual men present. Vittorio did not deny it outright. For one unguarded moment, his easy smile faltered into something almost like regret. I never wanted her hurt, he said. I only needed her gone before she understood what she'd heard. You should thank me. I could have done far worse than frighten her. It was the kind of half-true thing a man says when he has convinced himself that mercy and cruelty can share a sentence. Alessandro did not thank him. He remembered, then, the doorway in the great hall 5 years before. The only person who had ever told him to move without knowing who he was. He understood now that she had never once, in 5 years, asked him for anything at all, and that this, never asking, had been the loudest thing she'd ever said. Sophia was 3 days into a rented room above a bakery in Bergamo, teaching herself to want nothing, when Vittorio's man found her. She saw him before he saw her, a stranger loitering too long outside the bakery window, hands too still for a man just waiting on bread, and she did not freeze. She untied her apron, slipped out the flower room's rear door into the alley, and walked calmly into the crowded morning market 3 streets over, where she found the one person she knew would listen. An old customs officer Alessandro's own men had once helped after a flood, a debt Sophia had quietly kept track of for years without telling anyone why. She told him what she'd overheard in the cellar, plainly, without asking for protection, only that he passed the information to the right ears before anyone else disappeared. By the time Alessandro's car found the market square, Sophia was already standing in the open, in front of a dozen witnesses, Vittorio's man among them, and, moments later, Vittorio himself, arriving to finish what his man had failed to start. "You were never going to let this go quietly," Sophia said to him, loud enough for the whole square to hear, her voice steady as a hand that has already decided not to shake. "So I made sure it wasn't quiet anymore." Alessandro arrived to find the matter already turning, market vendors watching, the customs officer's men closing in from the church steps, Vittorio's smile gone entirely. He did not need to save her. He stepped in only to finish it, placing himself, wordlessly, at her shoulder rather than in front of her, a position she had not asked for and did not need, but that he chose anyway, in full view of everyone who worked for him. Lucia, who had begged to come, pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around Sophia's waist, exactly as she had the very first day, and the whole square seemed to still around the two of them, the way the great hall once had. Pause here. Have you ever watched someone decide, all on their own, that they were done being invisible, and known, in that moment, you would never see them the same way again? Vittorio's men, seeing their own boss exposed in front of a market square, in front of witnesses, in front of the very family he'd tried to quietly unmake, did not move to defend him. From her apron pocket, worn soft from years of habit, Sophia drew out the small folded square of wax paper, the camellia inside it, dry as paper itself now, and set it, without a word, into Alessandro's open hand. 3 weeks later, the good window in the room with the morning light had a name on the door for the first time. Sophia's, carved simply into the wood, not by a craftsman, but by Alessandro himself, badly, with a pocket knife, one Sunday afternoon. Renata still ran the household. Sophia no longer wore the uniform. In the kitchen, Lucia stood on a stool, measuring flour with the fierce concentration of a 9-year-old entrusted with something important, narrating the recipe aloud to no one, the way children do when they are simply happy. Alessandro leaned in the doorway, jacket off, tie loose, watching them both with the specific stillness of a man who had learned, finally, that presence was worth more than provision. He did not make a speech. He crossed the kitchen, took the folded, pressed camellia from where Sophia now kept it openly on the windowsill, instead of hidden in an apron, and set it inside the book she was reading, the same worn novel from years before, marking her page for her, the way he never had before, and left his hand resting for one moment over hers on the cover. She did not need him to say anything. The gesture was the sentence. Outside the same window, the lake caught the last gray light of evening, the way it had the night she folded a flower into a note and walked down the mountain, believing no one would come looking. Someone had, finally, come looking, and this time, the house held the door open before she ever had to knock. Have you ever given everything to a place, a family, a job, or a person, quietly, without asking for anything back, and wondered if anyone had actually noticed? Sophia never demanded to be seen. She simply decided one night that she deserved to be. That's the part of this story worth sitting with. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't to fight for someone's attention. It's to walk away with dignity and let them realize on their own exactly what they lost. Is there someone in your life who has been quietly holding everything together? And have you told them lately that you see them? Tell me in the comments. If this story moved you, subscribe, because the next one goes even deeper.